guest today is a contemporary artist who does not paint pretty pictures. Rather, his works, which include painting, sculpture, installations, and photography, will prod your brain and your emotions. His work is exhibited in shows and collections across the world. But what fascinates me most is his interest in paper and books. But to find out more, let's call the artist Ravi Kumar Kashi to the show.
Hi. I'm glad to be here in this interview.
Your book has just been selected as one of the 5 final entries in the Minnesota Book Center. And getting there out of 158 entries from around the world is something quite incredible, I think. Congrats, and I hope you win. I think the results are to be announced this month, if I'm right.
Yes. Around October 23rd, they're supposed to reveal the final prize winner. But just being the finalist also is a accomplishment. And I'm very glad I've been there. And it is kind of recognition of my involvement in bookmaking.
I would like to trace your journey in this path of making paper and books. You've been doing it for close to 20 years, if I'm right. And I know you make the paper by hand and then you begin to create art on those pages. But first, I would like to inform our audience that, Raintree Media publishes books. And in one of the books, the Best of Bangalore Innovation Edition, Ravi had kindly given us an entire series to use as illustrations. And I think, it's drawn from the series In Pursuit of Happiness. And the second one, which is 1,000 Desires, is a fantastic display of 1,000 tongues. It's something remarkable that you have to see to understand why it makes such an impact on the viewer. Ravi, tell us how you got started on making paper, and then how did it then lead to making artist books?
My interest in handmade paper started from my childhood. When I used to visit the Vishwesvaraya Museum, they had a paper making demonstration unit there. And then whenever I went there, I used to think that I will do it one day because it's very tactile and a very interesting process. Then much later, when I was in Baroda, I did attend a workshop as an observer. And it was only when I went to Glasgow in 2001, I actually started learning a very methodical way of making paper. I went on a British Council scholarship. So for about one semester, I was there. And my teacher, Jackie Perry, taught me all the nuances of making handmade paper from various plant fibers and all that. So that was the, in a way, a systematic study of paper making. Bookmaking, I was using in my painting a certain kind of format where you have 2 sides, like a magazine or a book. And I used to juxtapose images and all. Then in 2000, I made it had two sides, which were sitting like a, traditional book, like a holy book. And I used to do that kind of work. Then after I came back from Glasgow, I wanted to try casting of the book. So that's how that connection, I had the idea of a book, and then I learned paper making, and then it became a paper book. But it was only when I started visiting Europe and I started seeing many more artists working with that form, I realized there is actually a genre which is called book art or artist books, where all kinds of interesting works are being done. So then it was a kind of affirmation of what I'm doing, even though not knowing that exact genre, I was already into that. And then once I knew this discipline, I started studying more of it, and then my artist book also became more and more innovative, explorative, and all that, because I got to see a lot of interesting works in that discipline.
And you also have been teaching people to make paper, right? I remember over a period of time, I don't know if you still do it, but I do remember a time when I was very keen to come and join your paper making workshop. Do you still do that?
2010-11, I used to do workshops, weekend workshops in my studio. And after that, I have not done many of them. There are some artists, like friends, they come and stay with me, they learn paper making and go back. From other states and other places in the country, they come. And once in a while, I do workshop with children for a dedicated 2 days or 3 days. One group of children come from a school, and they learn paper making with me and go. Other than that, I go to schools, I go to institutions, I do short workshops.
I think it must be a phenomenal feeling to produce the paper and later on use it in your artist book. I also am impressed with something that you had told me a few years ago. You were talking about how you use objects in your installations that you do, and the objects that people use in everyday life. And you had said that objects actually become an extension of ourselves. If I've been using an object very often, it actually becomes an extension of myself, and it actually retains its memories and it develops a persona over a period of time. So how did you deduce this, and how have you used this insight in your work?
Objects actually tell you a lot about what that person is. If I go to somebody's house and if I'm going for the first time and the person says, just wait, I'll come in 5 minutes or I'll go get a coffee, and you start looking around and if there are sculptures and things in the showcase, you start understanding what that family is about. How many people are there that are interested in sports or culture. So objects have the capacity to reveal something about the owner. We call it revelatory character in architecture. Even the houses do that. So it's a visual communication tool. And even when people do interviews, they would like to decide what has to be seen in the background. Like now I am putting a painting and brushes to convey something about what I do otherwise. And in my last solo show in 2016, which was shown in Sumuka Gallery, which is called Silent Echo. And then the same show also traveled to Bombay in Sakshi Gallery. I use this idea a lot, where how does this object become a very important extension of a person, and then as a society. And for example, if I am looking at objects of Gandhi, which he used, I know it's all kept in various museums. I've done a book where it says everything he touched. So the moment Gandhi touched that object, it may be a microscope, it may be a spoon, it becomes something above normal. It gets an aura around that, and then people keep it. The life of the object gets extended, and the character of the object gets enlarged in that sense. So I use this kind of ideas. And also when two objects come together, there is a third meaning that starts coming. Right? If I'm arranging objects, if I keep a cup of coffee and then some biscuits and book, that is a kind of contiguous narrative. If I bring something else there, like let's say a sharp knife or a bottle of blood or something, then the whole narrative is disrupted.
I think that really opens up the mind and the brain of the viewer, and they think about possibilities that they may not have considered. I know you create a kind of a multi-dimensional art. You use sculpture, you use installations, you use photography. Tell me how that happens and why you do something like that.
Basically, one of my deep fear is that I will get stuck somewhere and then go on repeating myself endlessly. That is one fear which is operating somewhere in the background. And the second is that innate curiosity to see new possibilities. Both work together. So whenever I think I am very comfortable in a certain space in my work, and it's becoming slightly repetitive, I try to break that pattern and go and do something else. Maybe try, if I've not done sculpture, I will try to do sculpture. If I've not done some other medium, I will do that. And in that process, there are new possibilities which open up. And when I go back to my painting, or I go back to my anything that I was doing before, it is not the same thing anymore. So now it has become a habit, and at simultaneously I'll be doing some photography project, and I'm doing a painting, and there are some ideas developing by a sculpture. So it has become a habit now. The interesting thing is there that some idea which you got in a photography project gets transferred into some element in painting, and something from painting gets transferred into sculpture. So there is a kind of cross pollination, you can say, and the whole language is enriched because of this habit. And I think it's very crucial for my practice that I don't restrict myself to a certain window or a certain way of being defined. He does only this kind of work or only this kind of medium. And it has really opened up many new avenues for me. And I'll continue to do it because I really enjoy the process of finding new ideas, new ways of communicating, entirely new nuance in a language, and that is the interesting part, I think.
I like the way that you continually challenge yourself and push your boundaries. You blossomed as a writer, and one of your books on art has also won an award. I think it is from the Karnataka Lalit Kala Academy, if I'm right. So, are you working on any other books parallelly along with making art?
The flexing muscle book was the result of documenting the Bangalore flex banners for a decade. I'm documenting the images which are seen on the vehicles now. So it was there earlier, but I'm looking at it very intently now. So people put up images of bull, horse, and various kinds of animals, and they put up statements about themselves or the society. So it's almost like, as we talked about the objects revealing the owner or the person who is handling it, vehicles also says a lot about the person who is riding it. Especially autos and taxis, they say something about themselves. They want to say that they are like an elephant. Wherever there's a traffic, they'll just go like that, or they are the winners. Or some of the vehicles said, "Don't touch me, I will really kill you," almost to that effect. So it's very interesting to see how the identity is being revealed through those images which are seen on the vehicle. And now there are also various subgroups or caste groups also. They proudly reveal who they are. And then I connect that with the newspaper clippings, which I keep doing every day, how those communities are trying to get a fair share for themselves in terms of the social justice and reservations and all that. So I start connecting the two. Then there is another layer of visual language that is being played out. And also I'm documenting the hand painted images on shops. Before the flex came, the digital technology came. On the shop, somebody would go and paint actually whatever being sold in that shop. I collect images of politicians, how they generate images to communicate with people. So maybe one of these three will become a book.
Tell us something about the work of yours that has been chosen for the MCBA prize.
Okay, so the work which has gone to MCBA prize is called Remember Everything Will Be Remembered. It's a palimpsest. Palimpsest means where the text is overwritten. I already have a text, I already have something, then you erase it partially or fully, and then you write over and above that. So that is the idea of a palimpsest. So I have used this idea of the concept of palimpsest to talk something about what is happening around me. When the idea of secularism, the idea of equality is being continuously or slowly eroded or redefined in a different way. So I am in a way concerned about that. And this particular work which I had sent to the MCBA, it has the format of a copper plate, which was used earlier in the various royalties and kings. If they are decreeing something, or if they are giving some kind of donation for a charity to a temple or somebody, they would write it on these copper plates, and it is kept like an edict. So what I am doing is, as a citizen, as an artist, I am creating these copper plates about my time. The digital technology may get erased at some point, but these copper plates will remain for a longer time. So I have collected news reports from the Delhi riots, and then first layer of the copper plate is our constitution. This one, it's partially erased, and on that the Delhi riot reports are etched.
What do you think is the role of an artist in current times? Should an artist live in artistic seclusion, or do they need to become an activist? Do they need to play some role in commenting and observing today's realities, whether negative or positive? Because I think your work, the one that we just talked about, and even the flexing muscles, they're kind of a commentary on what's happening around us. So do you need to take a stand? Have you taken a stand?
What I feel is that an artist has to be very sensitive to what is happening around him. Right? He can't be just sitting in a shell and he'll say, I'll do my own creation, and then I'm not connected to the rest of the society. So in that sense, I am responding to what is happening around me, because I see it on a daily basis, and I am concerned, I am touched by it. The role I am playing is more of a witness rather than an activist, because all said and done, a work of art has to succeed as a work of art. And then the content also is part of that. But at least for me, I don't want to play the role of an activist. My work becomes a kind of witness, which I'm doing for my time. It has political overtones because that is what is happening around me. But I also touch upon other aspects which are very philosophical in my work also. It's not that it's always political, but this particular work happens to be so. So I would see myself more as a witness a very aware witness, and then trying to record this time through my work. And I am under no illusion that my one work will go and change something outside the art arena. That would be an illusion, because art doesn't have that kind of, at least, for me, that's what I feel. It won't change the social reality outside so easily, but it can make people sensitive. It can bring these issues into people's mind, and they let them talk about it. But direct change, I think, is little difficult.
Well, that's what we can hope for, that, art and culture can become a change agent by subliminally influencing mindsets
Correct.
and people. And that's one of the reasons I keep saying again and again, schools and parents should expose children to contemporary art, because then they'll understand that art is more than drawing straight lines and painting pretty pictures. And,
Exactly.
I think your works would be something that would inform the young minds and open up the older minds to what's happening around us, and the kind of risks that one takes in expressing themselves artistically.
I agree with you that the children should be made aware of the visual language, because more than any time now, we are all inundated with visuals. And if you're not critical about what you are seeing, you can't take it passively. If you're critical, then you can make an active meaning out of that, and then receive the image, which is coming through all sources, including your mobile and everywhere. So start an active engagement with visuals rather than receiving it passively. So education in schools will be a route for that kind of active engagement.
It's good to know that both of us agree on this. And thank you for your time, Ravi. Thank you for appearing on Spotlight with Sandhya. And to our
Thank you.
viewers, I would say I hope you enjoyed this introduction to the world of contemporary artist Ravi Kumar Kashi. And as usual, please subscribe, share, and like this interview. And you can also listen to this interview as a podcast on Spotify.